Hello, everyone. We're Team 5, and today we'll be presenting our final project for our class Future Societies. The topic and the thesis of our presentation is supply chain disruptions and the fragmented future of global trade. Next slide, please. So here's the structure of our presentation. We will first discuss how and why the global supply chain broke down. And then we'll be talking about the impact of these disruptions. And we'll also be discussing new technologies, new trade deals, and new opportunities on the horizon regarding supply chains. And then we will be talking about the conclusion we came up with. However, before we get into details, I would like first all to visualize how supply chain breakdown might look like. And after that, my colleague Bam will continue with the presentation.
Worried customers have been snapping up everything in sight. Store shelves nationwide are dwindling or totally empty, like at this Target near Washington, D.C.
I can't believe what people are doing inside. Shelves are empty. It's like we're going to, I don't know where. It really is unexplainable.
The sudden push for preparedness has stores rushing to replenish. President Trump urging moderation from consumers.
You don't have to buy so much. Take it easy. Just relax.
Many stores now limiting the number of high-demand items customers can buy, like hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes. Kroger and Target increasing staff, while they and many other retailers like Wegmans, Safeway, Trader Joe's, Publix, and others are cutting store hours. They need the time to restock merchandise and to clean more thoroughly. This freezer section nearly bare. Here, produce gone, cleaning products low, bleach totally bought out.
We just tried to,
Worried customers.
So in light of the outbreak of COVID-19 that unprecedentedly created a pandemic, this has forced governments to induce lockdowns to help minimize the spread of the virus. Then as an outcome, this has resulted in the worldwide disruption. Another issue that pressures the complex supply chain are the political tensions. We are seeing the growing tensions between nations around the world, hence the sanctions and economic and regulatory barriers. Moreover, a problem that the supply chain disruption made is the unequal recovery. This has exacerbated inequality and made a certain sentiment and trend that aims to avoid utilizing such complex system. Lastly, the foundation of globalization is based on the theory of competitive advantage. However, this acknowledgement of specializations of nations that has led to bottleneck. For example, for Vietnam, their competitive advantage is their population density and their concentration of manufacturing due to cheap labor. Since a lot of countries depend on Vietnam, it has caused the supply chain stoppage. Then to further explain this vulnerability, my colleague Haruna will be providing an example and discuss such case.
So as one of the problems, when we focus on the relationship between the China and another country, it is created many countries. So Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the US, and depends on the manufacturing in the China. So in Japan, about 80% of the masks are imported products, and most of them are from China. And the graph shows that over 50% of the final goods in Japan are imported from China, and also in the US, about 40% of final goods are imported from China as well. So also it means that these countries rely on the Chinese manufacturing and the Chinese labor. So also it means that like many countries are easily affected when something happens in China. So also in today's supply chain situation, 94% of the 1,000 companies experience a supply chain disruption. A large percentage of the companies are still using the manual supply chain processing instead of adopting the automation. So only 5% of the companies use their company's order fulfillment operation highly automated. 46% use a mix of the automated and the manual processes, and then 45% use the mostly or completely manual processing. So manual processes and too much depending on the one countries regarding the manufacturing, creating the gap and vulnerabilities within the supply chain, because many countries rely on the manufacturing and labor in China. So many countries have to focus on their own country to keep the goods and have to have the new functions for the supply chain and the manufacturing. So now I will pass to the Pablo.
So now we'll be talking about the impact of supply chain breakdown. So there are two aspects of it. First, we have the short-term impact, and then we have the long-term impact, and both have certain subtle differences. So beginning with the short-term impact. So first, we have the supply chain shocks, which like you have a immediate shutdown of supply, which came after the demand shock. So that was the impact of COVID-19 lockdowns. As a consequence of that, and the later disruptions caused by the pandemic, there was a hike in the price of shipping goods via containers. So for example, if you look at pricing, the prices of shipping or leasing one container and shipping it from China to the West Coast of the United States, the cost was about $1,500 to $2,000 per container. That the same price, the same deal now is north of $20,000. We're also seeing delays in shipping because of the supply-demand imbalance and a lot of ships being stuck. And that has led to products being delivered late. For example, we're seeing products which are being ordered today in the holiday season, and the latest estimations on the delivery is going to be in around February or March 2022. We're also seeing inflationary pressures on goods as input prices across the board are rising, so that will increase the price of the final good. We're also seeing port congestions. For example, Port of Los Angeles, we're seeing a lot of container ships being stuck there as they all are queuing up to unload their goods. And there's also chases and container shortages, which is related to the port congestion as more and more ships are being stuck on the ports and around the ports, and they're not able to unload the containers. There is a container shortage as those containers, once they are emptied out on ports, they're returned back to the other ports in Asia where they're loaded again and sent again. We're also seeing a shortage of labor in ports. That is more of a structural change we saw after the announcements and the policies by the Biden government, which gave stimulus checks. That changed the nature of a lot of employment for a lot of employees there. And also now we look at some long-term impact from the supply chain breakdown. We're looking at fragmented supply chains. We're looking at an increase in automation in ports, ships, and logistics in general. We're looking at nearshoring, the practice of having a manufacturing or any part of your supply chain close to your shore or somewhere closer to your time zone. We're also looking at push towards automation and manufacturing as people are realizing we might not be able to realize on importing goods and raw materials anymore. Now my colleague Pascal will take over from here.
I will be looking at new technologies that could impact the future of supply chain, starting off with cloud computing and AI. Supply chains generate big data, and cloud-based AI turns that data into insights. Cloud computing coupled with AI has transformed how supply chains operate, and its abilities will only increase in complexity over the next 10 years. Through predictive analytics, cloud and AI systems can use past trends and market indicators to facilitate the following processes, such as informing supplier selection, improve customer support, real-time information on shipments. And through that, companies can build transparent supplier relationships by automating the information exchange between an organization and its suppliers and contractors. Organizations can easily manage their vendors down to each individual workers across geographically dispersed work sites. For robot and automation processes, according to Deloitte, strong growth over the next 5 years, particularly within supply chains operations that includes lower value, potentially dangerous or high-risk tasks. And robot technologies application includes automated vehicles like drones, trucks, and trains, last mile delivery and storage, and retrieval systems. Increased usage of autonomous robots can achieve the following objectives, such as increase efficiency and productivity, perform mundane tasks, and increase revenue through order fulfillment. The new pricing structures will enable companies to invest in automation, making leap into robotics much more feasible. And lastly, the Internet of Things is what it's made up out of interconnected physical devices and monitors that can monitor and collect and send data to cloud-based softwares for analysis through Wi-Fi. IoT devices have improved quality management in supply chains through GPS tracking of shipments and monitoring parcels conditions. The growing pace of technology innovations propels digital supply chains management solution, and this technical journey will become more accessible and cost-effective as new technology emerges. Organizations that rapidly adopt these emerging solutions will better navigate through this decade with greater insights and efficiency. Now we know that supply chains are not just about the technologies, but it's also about politics of the day. And now Charjuli will explain about the trade deals.
So moving on to trade deals, we thought it was important to mention two of the major ones that have been going on throughout this last few years. The first one is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Deal, also known as the RECP. So it is considered the world's largest trade deal signed in 2020 by 15 Asia Pacific countries, which includes China, but excludes the US. This will come into force in January 2022. And this deal covers a market of 2.2 billion people and $26.2 trillion of global output. The partnership will create a trade grouping that covers about 30% of the world's population, as well as the global economy. Many analysts have said that the economic benefits of this deal, the RCEP, are modest, and it would take years to materialize. The deal was widely seen as a geopolitical victory for China at a time when US economic influence in the Asia Pacific had decreased. Now, moving on to the TPP deal. Can you change slides, please? Now, moving on to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Deal. This was another massive trade agreement signed by 12 Pacific Rim countries, including the US, and together they covered about 40% of the global economy. And this was considered a centerpiece of the US strategic pivot to Asia. But this all changed when President Donald Trump withdrew the US in 2017. Those who supported, they believed that it would have expanded US trade and investment abroad, spurred economic growth, lowered consumer prices, and created new jobs, while also advancing US strategic interests in the Asia Pacific region. On the other hand, others saw a deal like this one to accelerate US decline in manufacturing, lower wages, and increase inequality. On the other hand, those countries that are still part of the TPP, they have moved ahead with a new version of the pact, which is now known today as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement of Trans-Pacific Partnership. And they have kept most of the original version intact. And then in September 2021, China applied to join the pact, which has put further pressure on the United States. It has been said that the US won't be rejoining the TPP as it stands right now, but President Joe Biden believes that he could try to renegotiate in order to include stronger labor and environmental provisions. So as you can see, judging by the trade agreements, some of these countries are getting in agreements with either China or the US. But for the future of the supply chain, it looks like trade partners will either have to choose the US or China, but they won't be able to have both. Unfortunately, with the current problems between the US and China searching for new trading routes, this may become a possibility. And based on the research we've done so far, we believe that approximately in the next 30 years, we will likely have one of the two superpowers. Now, moving on to the implications for trade. So now we know, due to a pandemic, now we know that businesses are aware of the potential disruption that could come from pandemics and or trade blockages. Some of the biggest risks are for trading opportunities in the developing world is growing protectionism, in more advanced economies, often dressed up as national security protection. And to address all of this risk, we believe that the best possible option is new trade agreements that maintain an open trading system. As you can see, we have seen some positive developments until now. Now, moving on, we will see about the business opportunities.
Thank you, Sharjuli. Now, considering all the arguments we've discussed, there are some business opportunities floating on the horizon, and I'll be just going through one by one. So first opportunity we've discussed is nearshoring solutions for firms. Now, nearshoring means that you move your aspects of the supply chain. It could be manufacturing, it could be sourcing, it could be distribution, towards a region which is close to the intended zone of operations. So for example, you want to ship your goods to the United States, and your manufacturing, if it earlier was in Southeast Asia, now you decide to move it to, let's say, some country in the Caribbean. It could be like the Dominican Republic, or maybe closer or further down south in Panama. And you get the benefit of having lower wages than United States, maybe not as low as the ones in Southeast Asia, but low enough. And you also have benefits of having proximity to the United States and also having somewhat closer time zone. Next, we have shipbuilding for retailers. We saw in the during the port congestion that some certain big retailers took matters into their own hands, like Home Depot, and they bought their own ships to plug in the gap. And we also saw companies like Walmart sending their employees to work on the port. So we see businesses are getting more involved, and they need particular solution in the future. And a shipbuilding company which targets these retailers is one way to do it. Next slide, please. Then we also have automation and analytics in logistics, shipping, and ports. We realized that there is a labor shortage in the port workers. There's a labor shortage in truck drivers and the shipping industry in general. So there is an imperative to create automation in these sectors to mitigate the labor shortage. Then we have political risk consulting. As we've discussed in our presentation, the political risks have considerably increased since the start of the pandemic and are one of the most visible risks today. So firms in the future will be more willing to invest their time and money into assessing these political risks better, and having a consulting firm which caters to their needs is one way to go about it. Now we will be presenting our conclusion.
So we have discussed in our presentation how and why the supply chain broke down. We have also explained the weakness and vulnerability of this complex system, as well as emerging markets, trade deals, and potential business opportunity. All this data and all this point to the conclusion that the future economic structure will be fragmented. Thank you for listening, and we will entertain any questions.